start off with these very high-powered gentlemen that we have here. Mr. Mittal, which do you think are the two best achievements of the Modi administration so far? And which are the two things which, in your opinion, urgently still need to be done?
Well, let me at the outset say, while it may not be an agenda item, it is the revival of hope. What you call here a giant awakens, I call it a revival of hope. And that is a fundamental building block for any economy to start moving forward. I think that, to my mind, is the biggest achievement. You talk to all the senior peers in the industry, investors from outside, everybody's talking about suddenly about investments in India.
Yeah.
And that's very different from just a year back when people were talking about not investing in India,
right,
both domestic and foreign investors. I think the other part is the Make in India, the thrust towards manufacturing. Government was not looking at manufacturing, but I think the amount of thrust that is being given now towards manufacturing and what will follow through in series of events by way of policy making and budget, we will see manufacturing, which has the potential to drive maximum employment in the country, is going to get a tremendous boost. So I would put these two things at the top of the agenda. One is Digital India, making India a broadband nation, which is both Murthy's and my passion as well. A lot more needs to be done. Issue of clearing right of way to lay fiber across the country, allocation of more spectrum in terms of by way of auctions, of course, and ensuring that India gets onto the digital bandwagon at the fastest possible pace. And the other part, I would say, the government needs to be done, I've already mentioned when the finance minister was here, is to somehow manage what he called the art of possible to get the reforms agenda going.
Well, we'd like to welcome Mr. Suresh Prabhu. Welcome to the conclave, even though we would have been happier if you were here with us. So let us hear from you. The theme here is India Awakes. Now it's also high time the railways woke up. It has been seen as this slumbering giant which has not ever got really activated. There have been a series of railway committee recommendations of various kinds. Some people say, why don't you corporatize the railways? Why don't you split them up into various things? So, I mean, I understand that perhaps it's a little too early for you, but could you just spell out that to revive the railways and make them a live thing, which are the directions in which you are planning to take the railways?
Railways is one of the very important enterprise run by the Government of India. And it is not just the ownership of railways which matters. What matters is the efficiency, the productivity, the utility of the service to the people who use it. And from that standpoint, what is far more important is and how do we make sure that all the services that the railway offers are upgraded in the shortest possible time. Now, to make that, we have to make sure that we make investment, because there is a huge investment deficit already suffered by railways in the last several years. First thing that we are trying to do is we would like to make sure that all the stations, that particularly the last stations, the stations which are, as the railways categorize it as A plus, A and B, these are the stations which will be handling probably about 80–90% of the traffic. Could we make these stations better than what they are? So the private capital could come with ideas emanating from them. So we are not telling them this is one idea on which you bid. We are saying that this is what we want as an outcome. So we'll have multiple solutions for a railway station development coming from it. So that's first. The secondly, on-board facilities. Now what happens is when person boards the train, he has to use the toilet, he has to eat food on the train, he has to drink water, he has to be treated properly. So to make sure that, we have to first revamp all the coaches. First we must go in for the new coaches, but the existing coaches also need to be retrofitted. So therefore, that is something which we are trying to work on. There are enough number of pension funds in the world who have got really huge amounts of money. Let's take Australia. Australia's pension funds are $2 trillion, more than the GDP. Look at China, sitting on $4 trillion of foreign exchange reserves. We could use some of this pension fund money where they look out for a long-term investment, long-term returns, maybe 20 years, 25 years, because the person who joins the job is going to get a pension only after 25, 30 years after his retirement. All of that money, they would be the ideal candidate. The money investment could be made in railways, because railways also have a regular flow of income. On a long-term basis, we could use those funds to make investment to railways, revamp the services. Railways will become a different kind of enterprise. So this is a priority number one. The priority number 2 is bring in a high end of signaling, improve the investments into the rail infrastructure itself. By doing that, we are making the travel safer. If you improve signaling on the same track, we could send in more trains. We are doing completely using our information and communication technology of a larger scale. So we'll be able to monitor each and every activity of railways to optimize the use of the assets that railway has invested in. But the railways have a unique ability to actually transform the economy of the country as a whole. So therefore, we are also thinking about, could railways be used as a logistic hub? So we were trying to think about getting now the other modes of transport, air, sea, roads and railways together, wherein railways will benefit because now we are getting far more traffic than what we could handle earlier. So we are planning a multi-pronged strategy. I am sure if everybody cooperates with us, we could actually bring in transformation in 3 years' time. The other strategy that we are putting in is that a core activity of railways will always remain in government hands. We have never said that railway per se will be privatized. What is important is we need to get private capital into railways. When the capital comes in, it not only comes in with money, it many times comes with technology, it many times comes with managerial practices. So suppose for example, we do electrification of railways using BOT. We use the signaling of railways by using BOT. We could either pay them through annuity or we could pay them through the BOT model. And then the idea is that we are in the process of preparing a 5-year plan for railways, which will be, the budget will be only a 1/5 of that plan. So there should not be a disconnect between the short-term vision and the long-term vision of the railways. So short-term action will be a part of a long-term vision. I think this is what I want the people to believe in, that railways are the future of India, and you cannot have future of India built without railways being vibrant. And if railways become vibrant, India's GDP could rise only because of that, maybe more than a 1 percentage point every year.
Mr. Narayan Murthy, so now let's come back. I mean, yes, the railways are important, but people will say this, in the services sector, that's also the future of India. So what would you say are the, once again to get back to the first thing, which are the 2 best things the Modi government has done so far, and which in your opinion are 2 things, a very important part of the unfinished agenda?
The first thing that the country should be grateful to the Prime Minister is for bringing a sense of confidence, hope, aspiration, speed, responsiveness and accountability. The second one is, as again Sunil pointed out, his desire to leverage the power of digital technology to enhance transparency, accountability and responsiveness to every citizen. Internet is clearly the best way of ensuring these things. There are 2, it's not so much the unfinished agenda that I want to talk about. 2 concerns I have, and that is, in order that the Digital India program succeeds, there will have to be several huge IT projects mounted by various organizations, both at the federal level and at the state level. The record of the governments, both at the central level and at the state level, in implementing projects on time, within budgeted cost, and with the quality required is less than exemplary. I don't know of a single IT company which has not incurred huge losses in taking up projects for the government. Now, if Mr. Modi wants to excite the entire country about Digital India project, if he wants to enroll a lot of companies, Indian companies, multinational companies in Digital India projects, then he has to find a way of ensuring that the projects are defined properly, that the officers spend the required amount of time on time, they have the required level of accountability, and that the whole project gets finished on time with reasonable returns. Reasonable. I don't want any extraordinary returns for private sector companies, but reasonable returns for private sector companies so that they are strong and they can serve the country, serve the government even better. That's the first thing. The second one is, if you want to make the life of the poor better, which, as you know better than I do, is the primary agenda of any country in a developing country like India, then there is tremendous onus on the state governments. Primary education, health care, nutrition, shelter, all these all state subjects by and large. While in Delhi, we have seen ever since Mr. Modi became the Prime Minister a sense of enthusiasm, a sense of confidence, a sense of responsiveness. There is no doubt at all whether that can translate to the same level of enthusiasm at the state level. I think these are the two major concerns.
How we can persuade the states.
Yeah.
Let's go to Chanda Kochar. I mean, you can go on the same thing about, which are the two things that need to be done. And if you have any questions of Mr. Suresh Prabhu on what needs to be done on the railways, that would also be interesting.
I think before we get down to what are the two things need to be done, you were also asking what are the two things that are done. I would think that the two important things that have been done so far, one is really improve the global perception of India. Whether it is with the governments in talking about political and economic ties together, or it is with the foreign investors, bringing back a lot of hope, confidence, positive sentiment about India. Second, I think there has been a big push and thrust towards manufacturing. And I talk about it not just from the Make in India campaign, but really saying that the Make in India campaign has then really been supplemented by various things like improving or increasing the FDI limits in defense and railways, talking about labor reforms, talking about simplifying how to do businesses, creating the processes or movements towards one-time clearances, website for how to start a business and so on and so forth. But in terms of what really still needs to be done, when I look at it as a banker, I would say one of the most important things that still needs to be done is to really achieve the final closure for the various projects that have been languishing and dragging so far. There have been a lot of investment that has been made in the country in the last 2 or 3 years, but a lot of that investment is not generating returns today. So, making sure that the last mile clearances are given, more so making sure that the last mile issues, for instance, the fuel supply arrangements, the coal issues around the power projects, etc., are sorted out. The second focus, I would say, should really be, I would call it broadly, the supply side of the economy, which means improve production, increase or rather declog, everything in the agriculture supply chain. Make sure that the supply in the economy increases, because that's the only way that can in a long term structurally control inflation. And not just that, as the economic activity improves, as manufacturing goes up, as the existing projects start producing, that's the only way investment will actually revive in the country. So, we have to look at now taking those smaller steps that can bring back the confidence of restarting investments in the economy.
Everybody talks about the revival of hope. stock market is soaring. And yet when the data for the GDP came out last time, frankly it was a disaster. Increase in growth of manufacturing was 0.1%. Increase in gross capital fixed formation, the fundamental, was virtually zero. So there is some reason why all these great hopes are not translating. Some people are saying this is partly because, this is very half-hearted reform. That they are not really being bold, they are not, they are constantly talking about the art of the possible. Other people would say, this is clever gradualism. We will do it slowly in a number of steps so as to not evoke protest, but a large number of small steps is equal to one leap. I would like to ask Mr. Mittal, why is gross fixed capital formation growth zero at a time when hopes are supposed to be soaring? After all, hopes should be translated into investment. And secondly, do you think this government is not being radical? Or do you think these large number of small little gradualism will work?
Well, I think I will probably take an analogy. India is not a speedboat. India is a large, big tanker in the ocean. And when you decelerate,
yes,
it will take some time for it to go down, and that's the lag effect that you're seeing, and the numbers that you are putting out are not obviously encouraging. But this is not for the acceleration that has started in the last few months. It is because of the deceleration of the last 2 or 3 years that you've seen this slowdown that you're seeing now. And equally, when you step up on the gas and you put your foot on the pedal, it's not going to take off like a speedboat. It's going to take some time. So if you were to have this conversation a year from now, and you still are having what you have in your hand as a data point, then I think we'll be probably looking at some, question marks here as to what's going on. I don't think so that is the issue. What you are seeing here is the lag effect of the last 2 years of the previous government.
Chanda Kochhar, your sector is a particularly important one. Which is the way forward? This particular sector, there's a huge amount of investor interest, I know. Large amount of money is flowing into these sectors. And yet there is something that the totality of non-performing assets, stressed assets and so on is going from 10 to 20% for various banks. How are we going to get out of this, and how do we avoid getting into this kind of trap the next time?
When you talk about stressed assets, first of all, you should remember that a large part of the assets of the banking sector, which is whether it's housing loans, car loans and so on, are actually very, very stable in their credit quality. So that talks about, the credit parameters that the banks have been using and the credit policies that the banks have been following and the repayment behavior of the Indian consumer, and this part of the assets remains very, very stable. When you talk about some of the large project loans, I think there you have to remember that if we are passing through an economy which in a matter of 6 to 8 quarters, the growth rates almost halved from 9% to 4.5%, in a situation where the project implementation got delayed by more than 100%, there is definitely going to be a situation where these projects are going to face delay in generation of cash flow. And if they are, if the cash flow gets delayed, their ability to service interest and loans also gets delayed. But I think the most important point to remember is that most of these investments are very sound investments. These are projects that have been set up on the ground, which are of good quality. These are projects that as they start producing, there will be enough demand for the products that they produce. So as some of the issues get resolved either around approvals or around fuel linkages and so on, these are assets that will start generating cash flows and will start servicing their debt. So it is more a matter of time, it is more a matter of hand holding these assets rather than saying that this money has really gone off the ground and that this money is never recoverable for the banking sector.
Okay, thank you, Chanda. Mr. Narayan Murthy, there is all this emphasis on make in India manufacturing. You are in the services sector which has soared. You must be asking yourself, why is there so much focus on the manufacturing, which in some sense is an older sector, and if your old sector has done so much better, do you think there is a mistaken emphasis on manufacturing when our comparative advantage may appear to be in services, and should we be pushing that?
No, I think I'm particularly very happy about this Make in India campaign for several reasons. One, we have been doing Make in India for the last 20 and 30 years almost. We have been producing software in India and selling it to countries where the demand is. We have been making reasonable profits. So I don't think this sector, or the IT sector, will grudge the Make in India campaign at all. Second, Mr. Modi has announced Digital India campaign, which is all about bringing the power of software, IT, broadband to enhance the transparency, accountability and access to government services for every individual. That is an excellent idea. We are all very excited. Third, while this industry, the software industry, has been able to produce 3 to 3.5 million jobs for the reasonably educated youth in India, the problem is that we have a large percentage of youngsters who are not that well educated. They have high school degree, high school education, perhaps pre-university, etc. If this country has to solve the problem of poverty, we have to create opportunity for jobs for these people. And in our opinion, the only sector that can make this happen is manufacturing sector in particularly low-tech areas. Therefore, I think Mr. Modi's strategy of Make in India and Digital India is a brilliant one, is something that will create opportunity for both the educated people as well as the not so well educated.
But Mr. Prabhu, I need to come back to you. Earlier, in your earlier avatar, as Minister in charge of electricity, you passed that Electricity Act, and we were very hopeful that this could transform the entire electricity sector. If you come back to the same situation today, I think the accumulated losses of state electricity boards, one way or the other, something like 200,000 crores. I mean, we cannot become a strong economic power with a bankrupt electricity sector. What, in your opinion, went wrong from the high hopes that you had raised? And very briefly, what can this Modi government do quickly to set right this mess in the entire electricity sector?
Of course, we have a very competent and very efficient Minister of Power. So I think rather I answer for him, he would have answered it better. But in my opinion, as someone who has handled the portfolio in the past, I could say that we missed out a great deal in last decade. It is not a political statement. Let me tell you why. We have something like $150 billion of investment which came into power sector. My good friend Chanda Kochar was very keen to finance it because she could see it as a sunrise industry. And she was willing to commit more funds to it, but what went wrong? Because we did not bring in the reforms in the attendance sector. The distribution sector, which should have been opened up, which in fact is part of the law. We have open access, which is actually inbuilt into the system. We created a regulatory framework, but the regulator did not do as a good job as was expected of them, if not all, some of them. The other issue of the fuel. We have a sector in which the generation is delicensed, but fuel is not delicensed. How could you work like this? And therefore, that created some sort of a problem. So Prime Minister Modi, his priority is energy. He's trying to put his political energy behind it. I am sure we'll see the good results in the next few months' time.
Thank you, Mr. Prabhu. Well, I think the discussion as it has gone, the outstanding problems really are very huge. There are a very large number of things to be sorted out. So while we did start off on this very optimistic note, when I listened to the summation of the unfinished agenda, it is a daunting one, a sobering one. But let us see what the Modi government has to do. There is no question that we have a Prime Minister who seems to be so busy that they seems to be taking decisions every few seconds. And while there may be small steps, it is entirely possible that in due course they will add up and we will get significant change. So India the sleeping giant? Awakening, well, okay, it's taking its time about waking up. It's not exactly up and running yet, but there are full 5 years to go, and let us hope and see that this particular government is able to live up to the high hopes that it has created. Thank you, Mr. Mittal. Thank you, Mr. Narayan Murthy. Thank you, Mr. Suresh Prabhu. Thank you, Chandak Pacha.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.